Mark, after 19 years, we're eliminating your position, my manager stated bluntly. Clear out your desk by the end of today. My name is Mark Peterson, 56 years old, and until that Tuesday morning I was a senior systems architect at Stellar Innovations in Denver, Colorado. For nearly 2 decades, I had been the cornerstone of the tech operations department. From the era of legacy servers to the transition to distributed networks, 4 different CEOs had passed through while I remained, mentoring every new team member, recovering every critical lost data set, and working through countless weekends and holidays without ever asking for a promotion or even a commendation. So, when Michael called me into his office, with Laura from Human Capital already seated, I sensed what was coming before he uttered a word. The atmosphere had shifted weeks ago. I understand perfectly, I said, giving a single nod. I walked out without saying anything further. No display of anger, no pleading, just a quiet acceptance. Back at my workstation, I observed younger colleagues glancing my way, then hastily looking back at their monitors. Unpleasant news travels swiftly. Most of them were developers I had personally trained. Good young people, but they had little idea what was truly embedded within our systems or how the foundational architecture functioned. None of them could navigate the bespoke software I had developed, or the administrative credentials buried 3 tiers deep in every system. I began to pack my personal belongings methodically. A family photograph, a coffee mug my daughter painted in art class, the resilient succulent that had somehow thrived for 19 years under the office's artificial lighting. Chloe from the communications team stopped by, her expression tight with unease. "Mark, I just found out, this is outrageous. You practically built this entire infrastructure." I shrugged. Companies shift strategies. "But without any warning? After everything you've dedicated?" Her voice was rising, drawing attention. "It's all right," I said softly, honestly. It wasn't all right, but I wasn't about to cause a disturbance. As I was preparing to leave, Michael stepped out of his office to watch me depart. No farewell, no handshake, just observation to ensure I actually left. What none of them had bothered to recognize over the years was that I had become the most indispensable individual in the entire organization. Not because I was uniquely gifted, but because I was meticulous. I documented everything, having established secure audit protocols years ago to track unauthorized system access at the request of the legal department during a previous internal crisis. I also maintained my own copies. In my car, I sat for a moment, looking back at the 15-story building where I'd spent a significant portion of my adult life. The access card I'd just relinquished had been updated 18 times. I started the car and drove home. They had no clue Thursday would be quite eventful. I had been with Stellar Innovations since it occupied just a small office suite in a tech hub. I started when my daughter Emily was in preschool. Now she was completing her master's degree. The company expanded and I grew with it. I turned down offers from rival firms because loyalty was important to me. My wife Sarah used to jest that the servers were my extended family. She wasn't entirely incorrect. I knew every system, every workaround, every unconventional solution to problems the executives weren't even aware existed. The infrastructure I'd constructed had endured 2 major mergers and countless technological innovations that senior management enthusiastically adopted, only to abandon months later. Michael became my manager 5 years ago, a young MBA type who referred to our department as tech assets instead of team members. He was full of ideas about optimization, efficiency, and digital transformation, buzzwords that usually translated to achieving more with fewer resources. Initially, I attempted to help him understand our systems, the inherent complexity concealed beneath years of growth and adaptation. "We need to future-proof," he'd declare in meetings, his gaze looking straight through me. 6 months ago, he brought in a consultant named David Miller. Expensive suit, confident handshake, an MIT degree prominently featured on his professional networking profile. They would gather in conference rooms, conversing quietly whenever I passed by. 3 months ago, I noticed my access permissions being subtly altered. Nothing overt, just minor adjustments to administrative controls. I could have raised objections, but instead I observed and documented. "You seem preoccupied lately," Sarah remarked one evening as we sat on the patio. "Is everything all right at work?" I nodded, taking a sip of my iced tea. "Just some changes, nothing I haven't encountered before." But these changes felt distinct. I was being marginalized in meetings. Emails regarding system upgrades no longer included me. Younger team members were assigned to projects I would typically oversee. Then I discovered it. A company-wide memorandum about modernization initiatives that had never been shared with me. It detailed a complete restructuring of the tech operations department under new leadership, David Miller. My position wasn't even listed on the new organizational chart. That same day, I uncovered something else. While running a routine security scan, one of those background tasks nobody else bothered with anymore, I detected unusual patterns in our financial software. Regular payments to a vendor I didn't recognize, Zenith Partners, Inc. A quick search revealed it was registered just last year, with a business address that led to a mailbox at ESET Outlet. The authorized payments had started small but were increasing each month. I didn't say anything, I just noted it, copied the records, and continued to monitor. Sometimes the quiet person in the corner observes everything precisely because everyone assumes they observe nothing. The morning after I was dismissed, I sat in my home office staring at my personal laptop. No alarm had roused me, no commute awaited, just silence and the gravity of what had transpired. Sarah brought me coffee, placing it beside me without a word. After 21 years of marriage, she knew when I needed space. "I'm going to the market," she said eventually. "Need anything?" I shook my head. After she left, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and retrieved a secure flash drive, one of several I kept safeguarded. Company policy strictly forbade removing data, but years ago, when the legal team required an audit system for tracking potential insider threats, I had been explicit about the necessity of off-site backups. They had approved it, then promptly forgotten. I plugged it in and began reviewing the files. Internal emails, meeting minutes I shouldn't have had access to, financial records that ordinary employees would never see. There it was, a complete history of payments to Zenith Partners, Inc., nearly $2,100,000, 0 cents over 18 months. The approval chain led directly to our CFO, Kevin Davis. I delved deeper, cross-referencing dates and figures until the pattern became clear. The payments aligned perfectly with a series of software license renewals for systems we used company-wide. But the amounts were inflated, sometimes by 15%, sometimes by 20%. Small enough not to trigger immediate alarms, large enough to accumulate significantly. I pulled up the business registration for Zenith Partners, Inc. The listed owner was Samuel Davies. A quick social media search confirmed my suspicion. Kevin's brother. They were siphoning company funds through fraudulent markups on legitimate expenses. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a shift within me. Not anger, precisely, something colder, more focused. For 19 years, I'd solved problems, fixed systems, protected data. I'd been the reliable one, the steady presence, who'd never caused disruption. And they had discarded me like obsolete technology. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom, a junior analyst I'd mentored over the past 2 years, forgiving them for 6 years of ignorance. I reasoned the days were duty like I, who set the phone down without responding. I set the phone down without responding. The pieces all fit together now. Michael and the CFO needed me gone before anyone could connect the dots on their scheme. They probably assumed the evidence would vanish with me, that I was just some aging tech guy who didn't comprehend modern finance. I opened my email and began drafting a message to the board of directors. Then I paused, finger hovering over the send button. Too direct, too easily dismissed as the bitter accusations of a fired employee. I needed leverage, precision, a way to expose the fraud that couldn't be ignored or covered up. I deleted the draft and started making plans. Tomorrow was Wednesday, a strategic review day. Biannual fiscal reports would be presented. Mid-year performance incentives would be confirmed. Perfect timing. I closed the laptop and walked to the living room window, looking out at the neighborhood, where we'd raised our children and built our life. For the first time since yesterday, I smiled. Wednesday morning, I sat in my car across the street from Stellar Innovation's main office, watching employees stream through the revolving doors. On the passenger seat was my laptop, logged into an email account I'd created years ago for security testing, one that appeared to originate from an internal company domain, but wasn't tracked in the main directory. At exactly 9:15 a.m., I made my first move, an email to Michael with the subject line, "Financial irregularities, urgent review required," and a basic summary of what I'd found regarding the Zenith payments. I included just enough detail to be credible, but kept the brother-in-law connection out of it for now. If Michael was involved, he'd panic. If he wasn't, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd learned something. By 9:45 a.m., my phone rang. Michael's number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was terse. "Mark, we need to discuss your email immediately. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I drove to a quiet cafe, set up my laptop, and waited. At 10:30 a.m., another email appeared, this one from Laura in Human Capital. "Mr. Peterson, we've received concerning communication from you that potentially violates your separation agreement. Please cease all contact with Stellar Innovations employees and remember your confidentiality obligations. Any further communications may result in legal action." So, that's how they were playing it. Threaten, dismiss, isolate. I hadn't signed any separation agreement. At noon, I drove to my bank and accessed my safe deposit box. Inside was another backup, older but containing critical information I hadn't included on my regular drives. Among the files were original security protocols I designed, including documentation of who had access to what systems and when changes were made. According to these records, Kevin Davies had personally requested expanded access to the financial approval systems 18 months ago, right when the Zenith payments began. Back home, I found 3 more missed calls: Michael, Laura, and now David Miller. I hadn't expected him to get involved so quickly. Interesting. I checked my personal email to find a message from Tom marked urgent. "Mark, they're saying you sent some wild email about financial fraud. Miller called an emergency meeting. Everyone's talking. They're revoking your access to everything, even historical data. We need to do our jobs. What's going on?" Poor kid, caught in the crossfire. I sent a brief reply, "Don't get involved, Tom, just observe." At 3:00 p.m., my home phone rang, a number I hadn't used for business in years. I picked up but said nothing. "Mark, it's Kevin Davies." His voice was steady, controlled. "We should talk about your concerns. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Look, transition periods are always difficult. If you have questions about company finances, there are proper channels." "Like the board?" I interrupted. Silence. "The board doesn't need to be bothered with operational details," he finally said. "Why don't we meet tomorrow, just you and me? We can clear this up." "Sorry, I'm busy tomorrow," I said. "Besides, I think the board might actually be very interested in Zenith Partners, Inc. and your brother." The sharp intake of breath told me everything. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, his tone hardening. "We can make this right. Generous severance, references, whatever you need." "Goodbye, Kevin," I said, and hung up. Within 10 minutes, Laura emailed again. Suddenly, my severance package had doubled, with an attached agreement requiring my complete confidentiality regarding all company matters. They were scrambling now, but they still thought they were dealing with a simple extortion attempt. They had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning brought clarity and confirmation. I'd spent the night combing through years of data, connecting dots I'd previously overlooked. The Zenith scheme wasn't Kevin's first creative accounting project. 3 years ago, shortly after he became CFO, another pattern emerged: consulting fees to a firm called Pinnacle Consulting Group. Different name, same game. Inflated invoices for services partially or never rendered. I traced the registration for Pinnacle. This one led to Eleanor Davies, Kevin's wife. The woman was apparently CEO of a company that had no website, no employees, and a virtual office address. But the bigger revelation came when I dug into email archives. Michael hadn't just been aware of these arrangements, he'd helped facilitate them. In exchange, his department received budget increases while others faced cuts. He'd been brought in specifically because the previous director had started asking questions about tech operations expenditures. Even David Miller was connected. His consulting firm had been hired through an unusual process that bypassed normal procurement channels. His real role wasn't modernizing tech operations, it was eliminating the one person who might notice the financial patterns, me. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Create legitimate-seeming vendors, approve inflated payments, and split the difference. Since actual services were being provided, just at marked-up rates, auditors scanning for completely fraudulent charges would miss it. Over 3 years, they had diverted nearly $4,700,000, 0 cents. I gathered everything into a comprehensive report, spreadsheets showing the pattern of increases, business registrations linking the companies to Kevin's family, email exchanges demonstrating Michael's knowledge and participation. Then I did something they wouldn't expect. I contacted Arthur Lee, a board member I'd worked with years ago during a security system implementation. He was semi-retired now but still attended biannual meetings. "Mark Peterson," he said, answering on his second ring. "Long time. Heard you left Stellar Innovations." "Not by choice," I replied. "Arthur, I need 15 minutes of your time. It's important." Silence, then. "This wouldn't be about why Kevin and Michael have been huddled together looking stressed, would it? The last strategic review was tense." "Probably," I said. He chuckled. "Always figured you knew where the skeletons were hidden. Where can we meet?" An hour later, we sat in a park 3 miles from the main office. I handed him a sealed envelope containing a printed summary and a flash drive. "That's everything," I said. "Dates, amounts, connections. I'm not looking for my job back. I'm not looking for money. I just want the right people to know." Arthur studied me. "Why come to me?" "Because you actually read audit reports. I've watched you in meetings. You ask questions." He nodded slowly. "There's an emergency board session tomorrow. Finance committee review?" "Convenient timing, Mark," he said, pocketing the envelope. "If this checks out, there will be serious consequences." "I'm counting on it." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Someone named David Miller came by the house looking for you. Said it was urgent. I told him you were out. They were getting desperate." "Good." That afternoon I received job offers from 2 competing firms, both for positions well above my previous role, both offering substantial signing bonuses. Word had gotten around about my sudden availability. I ignored them for now. This wasn't about finding another job, it was about finishing what they had started. That night, using credentials that should have been revoked but weren't, sloppy tech transitions, David, I accessed the company's email server one last time and scheduled a message to be delivered to every board member at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. Subject: Before you approve mid-year incentives, read this. Attached was my full report. Friday morning dawned clear and bright. I sat on my porch with coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. No alarm clock, no commute, just waiting. At precisely 8:00 a.m., my scheduled email delivered its payload to the board members. By 8:17 a.m., my phone began to ring, numbers I didn't recognize, likely board members' assistants scrambling to reach me. I let them all go to voicemail. At 9:00 a.m., the Emergency Finance Committee meeting would begin. Arthur Lee would be there with my documentation in hand, watching reactions as my email was discovered and discussed. At 9:32 a.m., Tom texted, "Police are here. Davies and Michael being questioned in conference rooms. Miller looks sick. What did you do?" I didn't respond. The wheels were turning exactly as I'd anticipated. By 10:00 IE demand, Stellar Innovations' chief legal officer called. Unlike the others, I answered this one. "Mr. Peterson, This is Susan Bow from Legal. We need you to come in immediately to discuss information you've provided to the board. I'm available by phone, I replied. This really requires an in-person discussion. No, it doesn't, I interrupted calmly. Everything I know is in that report. Everything I have is already backed up in multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me or my family, additional copies go to the FBI, the Department of Commerce, and 2 major newspapers. Silence. Mr. Peterson, she finally said, her voice carefully measured, the board is taking this extremely seriously. They've already placed several executives on administrative leave pending investigation. They would appreciate your cooperation. I've cooperated fully by providing complete documentation. My part is done. After she hung up, I drove to a coffee shop 20 miles outside Denver. No sense being easily found today. Over lunch, news began breaking on local business sites. Stellar Innovations, executives under investigation for financial irregularities. No names yet, but that would come. At 2:00 p.m., Arthur Lee called. It's a bloodbath, he said without preamble. Evan confessed once we confronted him with your evidence, trying to cut a deal, blaming Michael for pressuring him. Michael's denying everything, and Miller claims he was just a consultant who had no knowledge of financial matters. The board isn't buying it. We've suspended all 3 pending further investigation. Forensic accountants are coming in Monday. Early estimates suggest at least $4,900,000 diverted over 3 years, maybe more. I nodded to myself. I'd been close. The board wants to talk to you, Arthur continued, about coming back, not just to your old position. They're creating a new chief security officer role, reporting directly to the board. I'd anticipated this possibility but still found myself surprised. I'll think about it, I said. That evening I told Sarah everything. She listened without interrupting, then asked, What do you want to do? Good question. The revenge part was complete. The people who'd pushed me out were themselves being pushed out, likely facing criminal charges. Justice had been served, cold and precise. But returning to Stellar Innovations meant walking back into the place that had discarded me after 19 years of service. Could I do that? Did I want to? I need time to decide, I said finally. Later that night I opened my laptop one last time and posted a single message to my otherwise dormant professional networking profile. Never burn bridges, just let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. Within minutes, former colleagues began reaching out. Word was spreading. The quiet systems architect had brought down 3 executives without raising his voice. By Monday, everyone would know exactly who they'd underestimated. Monday morning, I walked into Stellar Innovations' main office wearing a suit I hadn't needed in years. The security guard did a double take, then quickly printed me a visitor badge. Welcome back, Mr. Peterson, he said with newfound respect. The elevator ride to the executive floor was quiet. I'd never had reason to visit this level before. Now I was expected in the boardroom. 10 board members sat around a polished table. Arthur Lee nodded slightly as I entered. The interim CEO, Ms. Evans, previously the COO, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Peterson, she began, thank you for coming. The situation you've brought to light is unprecedented. I remained silent. The full extent of the fraud appears worse than initially reported, she continued. The forensic team has identified nearly $5,500,000, 0 cents in diverted funds. Criminal charges are being prepared. Still, I waited. Arthur cleared his throat. Mark, the board has unanimously voted to create a new executive position, Chief Information Security Officer. Full executive privileges, reporting structure directly to the board. We'd like to offer you the role. I set my folder on the table. Inside, you'll find my conditions, I said. Non-negotiable. Miss Evans opened it, scanning quickly. Her eyebrows rose. Full audit authority across all departments? Independent budget? Veto power on financial technology decisions? I nodded once. This is unusual, she said. So was embezzling $5,500,000, 0 cents, I replied. That happened because no one was watching. Now someone will be. The room fell silent. You have until noon, I said, standing. I have other offers. As I turned to leave, Arthur asked, "Did you plan this all along, Mark?" I paused at the door. I didn't plan to be fired after 19 years. Everything after that was just me doing what I've always done, identifying system vulnerabilities and implementing appropriate security measures. At 11:47 a.m. they called. They'd accepted every condition. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office, reviewing security protocols for the upcoming quarter. The view overlooked the Denver skyline, a daily reminder of how much had changed. Kevin Davies had pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. In exchange for cooperation, he'd receive a reduced sentence, still significant. Michael was fighting the charges, insisting he was unaware of the scheme despite the evidence. David Miller had fled to Argentina, but was being extradited. The money had been recovered, most of it anyway, enough that the company avoided serious financial damage. My former team now reported to me, though I'd promoted Tom to run day-to-day operations. The kid had potential, he just needed someone to see it. A knock at my door drew my attention. Sarah stood there, smiling. "Ready for lunch?" she asked. I nodded, grabbing my jacket. As we walked through the tech operations department, conversations quieted briefly. Not from fear, but respect. These people knew what had happened, knew I could have destroyed the company instead of saving it. In the elevator, Sarah squeezed my hand. I considered the question. The anger that had driven me those first few days after being fired had faded. What remained wasn't exactly happiness, more like satisfaction. Completion. "I'm good," I said. Outside, the October sun warmed our faces as we walked to a nearby restaurant. My phone buzzed with a message from Arthur Lee. "Board approved your security budget increase. Unanimous vote." I smiled slightly. No arguments, no questions, just trust. Sarah noticed my expression. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "Just thinking about bridges. Some collapse under their own weight. Others, once repaired, become stronger than they ever were before. I'd built this one right this time."